Okay, yeah, I only have two things that I want to go over today. One of them is I've put new doors that Carl Lorenz has been working on. And for those of you who don't know Carl, he is working remotely, not out of any of the offices, remotely on the project design, and has helped me a lot last month building up specific things in the Revit library, noticeably the door and window families. Carl, are you on? I think I saw your name up.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. So he has been working on the doors. I think the exterior doors that he's been working on are the ones that I moved over to Blue Standard, and those are the ones that I'm going to be showing you today. And then, Carl, if I'm correct, the interior doors haven't been changed yet, but you are going to work on those at some point. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been working on them as you know when my project has been under review, so I'm still working on them.
Okay. Yeah. So whenever those are done, I'll move those over and let you guys know as well. And there's nothing, no huge differences in these doors from the old ones. There were some, minor bugs in the old ones, and these are just built a lot more cleanly now. The major change is that, like the windows that were released a little while ago, these doors now also have the trim placed inside of the door family, so you don't have to place those elements individually after you load it into your project. Again, just like there you go. Just like with the windows, though, if you have these doors inside of like a sill bonnet area, you can turn the trim off and model it individually around those areas instead of around the door. Of course, as soon as I click on something, my Revit freezes. But yeah, if you've used the windows that were released recently, it works the same way. There's a variable for the trim type, and the trim family is loaded into this family, and you can select any one of the different types of trim in the exterior trim family as your trim for the door. There's also a secondary parameter, which you have to adjust separately from selecting the trim type, and that is the trim width parameter. And as some of you who may have done some modeling of Revit families before know, Revit is a one-way system in that if you have a nested family inside of a parent family, you can change a value in the parent and make the child obey, but you cannot adjust the parent according to a parameter inside of the child. So unfortunately, selecting the trim doesn't change the trim width parameter. You have to set the trim width parameter once you change the trim to make sure it actually just controls the way that these corners line up. So let's see, yeah, so here's trim width. You can see if I change that to 4 inches, now this extends over the side. And those don't line up cleanly. And here is your trim type parameter. We'll change it to that. So you can see, unless the trim width and the actual trim type line up dimensionally, you get weird-looking corners. So just set your trim to whatever your trim is supposed to be, and then go up and adjust your trim width parameter to match. There we go. And then we're looking for that trim visibility parameter. I forget where it is.
You trim one side off.
Visibility. There we go. No, it's all together. Yeah. So if you turn the trim off, it turns all three pieces off.
No, I mean like the front and back.
Oh, I don't know. Carl, did you consider that in building these? I don't think I told you to look at that.
Did you say interior trim?
Yeah.
No, I didn't, but it brings up something that I've wondered about, whether or not we don't do that, and then also on top of that, maybe even put in the drywall bead, the drywall return as an option too. I don't know. That might be something that we talk about a little bit in more detail. But,
okay. I know the way that the BOM works is that there's the interior material parameter, which you're supposed to use to select either pine trim as the interior trim or the white drywall for a drywall return. So if we add sort of the visual representation of that inside of the family as an object, as a nested object like the exterior trim is, and then the BOM needs to read the material parameter. I guess I would have to ask Jeremy if he would switch the BOM to look for the nested object or look at that parameter rather than looking at the material parameter like we've been doing it. So that's a bit more complicated an issue than just adding it to the family, which sounds like a reasonable thing to do. You have to make sure it plays nicely with the BOM.
So this is an exterior door. So on interior doors, are you planning on doing the same thing?
What is the trim condition for interior doors, or what are the trim options for interior doors?
Well, really, there's only one. The pine, I think, probably just pine trim. But in certain cases, like when you have a connector, when you have a doubled wall, either like the jamb size doesn't make sense to have it like 10 inches long or whatever, but you would have like an extra long drywall return. But the trim on one side of that door would be like offset from wherever that jamb is. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
just so you know, sorry, this might address what you're talking about. I'm actually building the new interior door families, or at least I'm starting to, and a while back we had this discussion about where the finish of the floor is relative to the position of the door on the wall, inside the wall. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm making the door slab, justified to one side of the wall depending upon the swing of the door and how you place it, so that it actually looks exactly the way it's built. You know what I'm saying? So the floor pin, and so that actually helps with the trim, with the look of the trim in plan also. Does that answer your question, or?
Not really. So like let's say you're putting a door in a wall, but it's a doubled wall because it's a connector next to a garage or a connector next to a mod, right? And it's doubled up, and that's just how we do it. The overall width of the wall that the door is sitting in is like, or like its thickness of the wall is like 10 inches. But you wouldn't order a door with a 10-inch jamb, right? You'd order a door with probably a 2x6 jamb, and then you'd have a drywall extension or some kind of extension, right? But you need the trim on both sides. So if you ordered, or if you grabbed the Revit family for a 2x6 jamb door, one side of your trim is going to be floating in the middle of the wall, whereas you want it to actually be offset, like 5 inches or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we could. The only way that I see around that is having a wall width parameter that controls one side of the trim or the other. I think what Carl was saying is that one side of the door is aligned to the outside based on the swing. Right. So you would have one piece of trim aligned to that side where the door is, and then the opposite side you would have the trim, but the depth or the offset of that trim would have to be controlled by a parameter based on the thickness of the wall.
Well,
I'm not sure if you could link that to the exterior face. Or turn it off.
Yeah. That's all I'm really asking for, like an offset parameter for one of them.
Well, actually, I think the way it is now, no matter, are those two walls joined together in Revit? Are they effectively one monolithic wall as far as Revit is concerned?
They're two.
It'll be two, but you could join them together. Actually, you would want to join them together so that the opening cut for the door propagates to the joined wall.
Would they be in different work sets?
Yeah, I think you can join two things from separate work sets.
Different phases?
I think so.
Well,
Yeah,
the other
Not sure about the phase thing, but
I know you can join them from separate phases because I know there are times when you have a window and a wall that the window is in, which are set to separate phases, and they don't cut through properly. So I know you can join them, but it can be weird to do that. So yeah, we should look into that.
well,
in my experience, if you join them, if they're on different phases, the one that's on the phase different than the door isn't cut through properly.
Right.
Quick question though, are we still building the connector with a full 2x4 wall on the outside of the mod wall? I've been told to just put like a drywall only wall there because they can just attach that right to the sheathing on the outside.
Well, I don't know, Ryan. If you finish those PSA details for me, I'd be able to tell you.
Thanks, Luke.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I don't know what our
The issue is the same because our exterior wall is still like a weird size, right? It's not as big as a wall.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll just have to build that flexibility into the family. You know, thanks for bringing that up. I wouldn't have thought about that in building it, but yeah, Carl, can you build that into the interior doors when you get through them?
well, say that again now.
Just
Build
adding a wall width parameter to that controls how far the trim, which is on the opposite side of the wall from the door,
Okay.
how far that distance is to control for different posting situations and wall widths.
Okay. Should there also be a visibility to turn it off or on in any case where like a trim on the inside versus the outside gets not shown?
Yeah, I think we should probably do that. I mean, it's not that hard to add that in. You could just have one for interior trim visible and one for exterior trim visible, and that way, if we run into a situation where we want one but not the other, we can just turn that off.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So that, I know that Carl and Andrew Daly and I were talking about these doors. The three of us have sort of been involved in this process for a while. And we're still having some issues with loading. For some reason, some of the CSV files for the type catalogs are giving some errors, and they're not errors that I'm used to seeing. So if all of the exterior doors have been moved over to Blue Standard, but if you guys run into any issues with loading them in, please help me debug and let me know, and just let me know which families they are and which types they are, so that I can go in and clean up the type catalog and export new CSVs. That would be really helpful. But other than that, I think they seem to be working well. Annotations are included in them. Carl, are there any other features that you'd like to point out in these that weren't in the previous ones that people should know about?
No, but quickly regarding those slider annotations, I still need to get in there and swap them to the interior.
Okay.
But in plan, but but I'm going to be doing. I'll probably do that by the end of the day.
Okay.
So I haven't looked at the new doors for a while, but on Schultz there was some confusion on what the lock set was per door. I don't know if that's something you choose when you pick the door.
Isn't there a hardware? Yeah, hardware doors. So here's your.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, jam. Actually,
That may not be specific enough because there's one set of, oh, there you go. Yeah. Basically, one has a lock and one doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so for these selector variables, we use them in a handful of different families, but basically, for those of you who don't know, the way that these work is you can set a parameter equal to a family type, and so you see where it says doors inside these little brackets. That means that this parameter is looking for a family type in the door category, and so if you use the drop-down, it'll give you a list of all of the doors inside of this. And so all of these hardware options are technically door families. And when you load this file into your project and you try to set this parameter, not only will it give you all of the hardware families which exist within the family, so yeah, so door, hardware doors. So these are all of those hardware door families. As you can see, jam depth is also technically a door family. But once you load it into your project, if you try to select that parameter value, it will give you all of the doors, including actual doors, that are in the family. So just make sure that you select something out of this hardware doors door family. And that doesn't have a physical representation in the model at all. There's not actually like a piece of hardware up here. This is strictly for scheduling and BOM purposes. So you can schedule this parameter in your door schedules, and each one of these has a BOM parameter. Yeah, so there's your BOM number associated with that object, so that when you export the BOM, it knows to count up the quantities for each of those hardware types, so they know how many to order for the doors.
Do you have a louvered option for the interior one?
We should have a louvered option.
As well as solid core and hollow core.
Yeah, and that's another parameter, another door parameter like these inside of the interior door families. And so I think we might have to do a doubled up parameter, sort of like selecting the trim and the trim depth, because for a louvered door, you're going to want the visibility to change based on which panel option you choose. And so what you'll likely have to do is, select your panel style, I think is the name of the parameter, and set that to louvered. And then there's also probably going to be a visibility parameter for louvered that you'll have to check on in order to make the visual representation of that show up as well. So you probably, again, not ideal, but you'll probably have to set it in two places to get the right thing on the schedule and the right thing in the drawing. All right. All right, so one other thing that I wanted to show, this is a seed model I've been working on. I showed you guys some of the stuff, albeit a little bit messy, last week. And I'm going to hold off on showing you anything else. I'm sort of hopefully putting the finishing touches on it this week so that I can give a really good and concise standards presentation and how to use seed models presentation to some of you in Ann Arbor. And then I'll give sort of a shortened version of that same presentation to everybody once it's ready. But the one thing that I wanted to show you today, I got a comment from Tom Lee a couple of days ago about how we're modeling fascia and how to, we need to change that. Basically, what he told me is that on our detail right now, we're showing 1x8 trim and 1x8 trim as a way to cover up the end of the SIP on a sloped roof. And I actually don't know. Okay, yeah, so this is on a balance, and I'm working on a balance. But this would apply to other models that also have sloped roofs. One of these pieces of trim needs to be a 1x10 trim in order to cover the entire depth of the SIP. And I don't know, Kevin, you might know better than I. Do you know how many different depths of SIP
Only two. We use one's 10 1/4, one's 12 1/4.
And are they both for slope grooves, or is one for slope and one for slab?
I think all of our slope grooves are 12 1/4. It has to do with span. So like the origin, because it only spans more or less halfway, because we have that long spanning beam going through the middle, we can use 10 1/4.
Okay.
Same thing with the side mods for the breeze house. I think element, balance, glide house, breeze space, evolution. I think they all use 12 1/4.
Element uses 10 1/4 because it only spans half the
Oh, right.
mod. I think evolution would probably be similar to.
Yeah.
I haven't worked on one, but.
Okay, so for the shorter spans, it sounds like you might be able to get away with a 1x8 and a 1x8.
Well, it also depends on the slope, right? Because what you're doing is you're
Right.
You're getting
the hypotenuse. Okay, so yeah, just try to be aware of that. If you, maybe we can figure out which projects you need to do this on to switch the 1x8 to the 1x10, or which products rather, and which ones can stay as 2 1x8s. But for the balance, given the distance you have to cover, one of these trim pieces has to be changed to a 1x10. And the way that you do that, I don't remember actually if I've ever covered how to do fascia in these meetings before, but everybody seems to be doing it. So if I need to go over the general how to use fascia more in depth than this, I can do that. You can just yell at me.
Wait, does our standing seam go over the fascia? And if it does, how do we make it do that in our model? Yeah. So it does, in that detailing.
It does go over. There's a cap metal piece, a drip edge that covers it.
Okay.
If you zoom into that detail, you can see it actually.
Yeah, it looks like it.
But in the model, it wouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah, in the model, it would end probably right here.
Right.
Because that's where the the end of the roof object in Revit is.
I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, is that the level of detail that we should really be modeling? I mean, just for the sake of the argument, I would argue it's not. But I mean, if there's a reason for it, like
I would
I'm cool
tend to
with
agree
that.
with you. I mean, I don't think we need to get our Revit models to this level of detail of making sure that the things overlap. My understanding is that we have to model the fascia, A, to make the edge look sort of right, and B, to make sure that the quantities are represented inside of the model so they can be scheduled and all of that sort of stuff. But I would agree with you, Steve, that I don't want us to have to jump through the hoops that we would need to model this 2-inch overhang of the standing seam metal.
Yeah, because I mean, I could see a way to do it, but it would essentially be like making a second roof on top of a roof, kind of like we do with the subfloor and the tile floor. And I don't know, it seems like a lot of extra modeling and joining and headaches that might have to occur there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I think that's a little too much. And in general, I think we need to model. This is my standard line. We need to model to the level that we need to in order to coordinate elements with one another. And then anything that is at the level of detail, to actually build it as a shop drawing or a construction detail, that information exists within the detail itself and not in the relationship of the model elements. So for a door, you need to know what the rough opening is, but exactly how the jamb is laid out and all of that sort of stuff, you look at the jamb detail. I like to keep the modeling as simple as we possibly can, but again, we need to get proper quantities in there for the things that are being scheduled.
So if somebody is procurement, like taking it, well, do we report the square footage of standing seam metal, for example? And would that extra 2 inches make a difference?
We probably do report it. I think the extra 2 inches is within their waste factor, and so that's sort of an offline conversation that we would need to have with procurement about our modeling practices that sadly we haven't had. But like if we say, look, this is the way that we're modeling our roof, we're not accounting for this extra 2 inches as is shown in the detail, is that okay with you? Or just inform them that they need to put an extra 1 or 2% in their waste factor to cover what's not being modeled. But that sort of like granular level of procurement design coordination has never been worked out. But for this, I think it's small enough that it's probably not going to make it.
So then and I'm sort of beating that horse here, but the next question is when somebody does a shop drawing and like somebody on the site looks at a drawing and it says 16 feet 2 inches. And they're like, okay, I'm going to cut my standing seam at 16 feet 2 inches. And they go to put it on and like, shit, it's 4 inches too short. Like, who is doing that measurement and where is it coming from?
Yeah.
And if we're taking it off the model, then
I don't think it's happening like that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the standing seam isn't something that they're going to install in the factory. Like, you're probably going to get the roofer who's, my guess is you'd have the whole mod assembled on site with the SIP in place, and then the roofer is going to go up and have the sheet with them, run it down the roof, cut it at the end, and then come back with the seaming machine to get everything weather tight and integrate it with the drip edge and everything like that. So honestly, they're probably, if a roofer is going to put that down, the only thing I can imagine them using it for is like a material estimating to know how much they're going to need for a job, in which case, like Luke said, they're probably building that into the slop factor anyway. So.
okay.
Yeah, when you get to the level of construction documents and shop details, I think there's there's definitely a gap between what's happening in the model and what needs to be built. And for the most part, it's been my assumption that we don't really need to deal with that.
I mean, it's not specific. It's not even like specific to standing seam. There are other areas where this kind of thinking applies.
Yeah.
And I've heard grumblings like in the engineering team or the shop drawing crew saying like, well, the model that we get doesn't have all the blocking we need, so we don't necessarily like capture it all, and then it gets out to the site or to the factory, and they're like, oh wait, where's the blocking? And it becomes a headache. And I guess we should just be clear, or at some point we need to have a conversation with them saying, hey, you need us to model these things when it's there, or is it something that you would do, like, or something that someone knows to look at a standard detail, say, hey, we need blocking here, so do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we definitely do need to have that conversation with them, with the engineering team about what they're using the design model for, how much specificity we need to have in it, and how much they need to take responsibility for translating from a design model into what they need for a shop model. And I think there's been a lot of finger pointing back and forth, or not even communicating with one another. Like I feel like if they expect something to be in the model that's not there, it would be really nice to have them say, can you please put this in the model? And then we can have the conversation about, well, I don't think it should be in there. You think it should be in there, and then we can have back and forth and make a decision as to whose responsibility it is and how, when those sorts of elements or those decisions need to be taken into account. I feel like a lot of this is going to be talked about with the new engineering manager and them getting their shop drawing models set up. And I feel like they're in the process of trying to develop their standards for their models and how they're producing shop drawings. And then Jason and I are going to need to have a conversation about, okay, what do they want in their models? What do we have in our models? And figure out how they can play nicely together and what needs to be in each of them.
So,
yeah,
okay.
it is sort of undefined in a lot of small situations, like, you know, overall dimensions versus details.
Right. So then Tom Lee's like comment that this thing should be a 1 by 10 or some 1 by 8. Like that, for me, that's the same conversation, and it's like, why are we? If we're only concerned about like kind of how it looks,
yeah,
and whether it's a 1 by 10 or 1 by 8, like.
The only reason it matters to me is that if we make a schedule of our fascia, it's going to say you have this many linear feet of 1 by 8 and not this many linear feet of 1 by 8 and this many linear feet of 1 by 10. And so the communication that goes to procurement on what they need to procure for the project is different. So we need to know enough about how it's going to be built and to build to standard details, which of course we don't have, in order for our schedule that we deliver to procurement to be accurate for the project. So there's this circular, we don't know what the details are, and so we don't know how to build it, and if we don't know how to build it in our model, then proper information isn't getting communicated to procurement. So there's, you know, yeah, there is a disconnect between all of those things. And until standard details have been made and the discussion of what needs to go in the design model and what needs to go in the shop model have been made, I think we sort of have to deal with what it is for now and try to do our best.
Yeah.
Like,
I get it. I'm just.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you.
So just for clarity, we have to do, if we've got 2 pieces of trim that cover the edge of our roof, we've got to do 2 different fascias.
Yes.
We can't make a profile that's like 1. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so this one, I did the top one as the 1 by 10. So I made a 1 by 8 piece of fascia, which uses the profile of a 1 by 8 piece of fascia, which is 3/4 by 7 1/4. And also made another type, which is 1 by 10 fascia, which uses the profile for 1 by 10.
So are they on top of each other, or is one offset from the other one? Because there's one behind it.
Offset. Let me.
Okay.
So there's the 1 by 10. And there's the 1 by 8. And as you can see, yeah, there's your standing seam stopping right there. So this is not technically correct, but at least all of the quantities are in there. And actually, I don't even think this is aligned vertically exactly accurate, but the quantities are in there, and nothing else really needs to coordinate in our model to where this bottom stops and where this top stops. So it's, you know, good enough, close enough for what I think we care about. You know, someone else might disagree with me, but that's the level of detail that it's my understanding we need to provide right now. I also had another question yesterday from someone where they couldn't get their fascia to host properly, and it was because a roof had been made using a ceiling object rather than with a roof object. Fascia, you know, as with other things in Revit, requires a specific host, and fascia can only be hosted on roofs and model lines. So if you accidentally have it as a ceiling, you need to switch that out so that the hosting can.
What about soffit?
I think soffit is also. I think any of those in that little section. Yeah, I think all of these. So your soffit, fascia, and gutter require a roof as a host, roof or model line. Most of these things, model line is sort of like the generic thing that it can host on, sort of like a work plane hosted thing, except for linear elements. And actually, this gutter is a generic model gutter and not a gutter. So it can host on whatever. So you can see this one's hosting on the fascia. Whereas if we actually used a gutter, a pre-made gutter object, which is taken from a profile being extruded, it would have to host on the roof, I believe. You might be able to host it on fascia. I'd have to look into that one.
So Luke,
Yeah.
with the roof gutter family, one, you can definitely host it on the fascia as opposed to the roof, but it doesn't. The profile doesn't cap itself, so you end up having like a open end to your gutter, which you would have to cover with a filled region in elevation. So Andrew Daly and I built that generic model gutter family, and it's parametric where you can extend it to whatever length you need, and it has caps on either end, and then it's got the object lookup, and you set the material to whatever to the not applicable, and it bombs the same way that the gutter would if you set it to like the Drexel roof accessories material, whatever. So I think it's better to use this gutter just to have the caps automatically in the model as opposed to having the profile extruded and having to draft over the elevations when it shows up with an open end.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I mean, these seem to work well, easy to use. They look great. So yeah, I would.
The downspout work?
Did you make the downspout too, Ryan?
I don't think so.
Actually, I think I made the downspout.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was built before, but the downspout's really nice too, how you can sort of adjust the offset from the wall host and also like the length of the downspout from the gutter. So they work well together. I haven't had any issues.
It looks like that one's hosted on the wall. So you host it on the wall and then adjust the parameters to make sure that the downspout's coming out of the gutter.
Right.
Basic question, how are you supposed to end your gutter, or your downspout?
You mean like down
Like,
at
is it
the
supposed to
bottom?
like spurt out? Because I got some markups that said it had to like curve out at this like 35-degree angle. Why 35? I don't know. So I just drafted it.
If you, I mean, if that's a standard thing that we need to do, then we should incorporate it into the family. I mean, I've had sites where the contractor would just put sort of a drain inlet right at the base of the gutter so that it would match right up, whereas I think the 30-degree angle is probably for draining it out over the surface to a drain which is somewhere else. So, I mean, maybe that's something that we could add on and use a checkbox to turn on and off, sort of like the trim on the doors.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
We want to also add a direction, because we could go like...
Yeah, like an angle direction.
Well, probably just the 4 different directions, right? But
yeah, oh yeah, for whichever way it's sloping. Yeah, you don't want it to drain into the house, but other than that. Okay. That's all I got for this week. Next week, we're still working on some notation tools, which I think are going to be really awesome, but they weren't quite ready yet for this week, and I want to make sure that they're good and clear and easy to use. So we'll cover that stuff next week. I'm going to be in Ann Arbor next week, so I will run the meeting from there. I'm looking forward to seeing the new office.
Luke, we cannot wait to have you here. It's going to be awesome.
Wow. All right, don't get your hopes up too much. That's a lot of pressure.
Bring your slippers.
My slippers or my flippers?
Slippers.
Both. We got a river right next to the office, too, so you can go swimming.
All right.
You don't want to swim in that river.
All All right, guys. Yeah, have fun activities planned for me.
Will do.
All right, guys. All right, that's it for this week. See you guys next week.
Thanks, Luke.